the bottom line, sort of a philosophical point to all of this is if you eat for health, then your weight is going to take care of itself.
Yes.
That's the philosophical point. Eat healthy, and your weight will take care of itself.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another Brewer Report. I am Stacey Brewer, and I'm with my father, David Brewer. We are here today to talk about weight loss. They say weight loss is really not easy. And I have to agree, I have yo-yo dieted pretty much all my life. I've been up and down with my weight. And I will say, from my experience, the hardest part about weight loss is actually once you have lost weight, maintaining that weight loss. That to me has always been quite difficult. But today we're also going to get into not just how you can lose weight. We're going to give you some tips with that, but we are also going to get into the science of what it means to lose weight in terms of burning fat. So let's get into that right now. So, Daddy, let's talk about the burning of fat. What exactly is that? How does that work inside of our bodies?
Well, let's start with some startling statistics. Um, the nationwide obesity rate in the United States has tripled since the 1960s. Nearly 70% of Americans are either overweight, obese, or severely obese. And that's based on body mass index of 18.5 to 24.9. I'm usually somewhere around 22, 23 in BMI, which is your normal weight range. Overweight is 25 to 29.9. 30 plus is obese, and then severely obese is 40. Um,
Wow.
so this is how it works. People talk about metabolism. Uh, your how metabolism adapts during weight loss. But really, what metabolism is simply converting your food into energy. The science behind weight loss, et cetera, is goes through your muscle mass. Your muscle mass is the main factor in what they call basal metabolic metabolic rather rate and how you burn fat. And of
Mm,
course, as you age, your muscle mass declines. That's why it's important to do some strength training as you age. Are there hormonal shifts? Of course. But the bottom line is that's kind of the basics of it all. That's why I have a gym membership, a fitness membership. I still lift weights. I'm 70, be 79 this month, and I still pump iron because I understood that science. But at the end of the day, weight gain goes through your plate. Okay. It goes through your plate. There's no getting around that. And we'll talk more about that here shortly and how you manage your calories.
yeah, I'm glad you broke down that science about your muscle mass. I've heard people mention that, oh, it's better to actually do strength training than even just cardio. And I never quite understood it until you actually said it just now, in terms of just how it works with the metabolism.
Well, you can
So,
still lose weight running, obviously.
well, of course you can lose weight, but people just have said that strength training is more effective. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah,
because of the muscle mass.
right, exactly. So with what you just said, I better understand why now, because
Yeah.
I'm more of a cardio person. In fact, I like I said at the top, I have yo-yo dieted all my life. I tend to when I would lose weight, I lost weight in high school, if you remember, Daddy. I was overweight and then I lost weight. I would run 5 miles a day. Now I was in high school in that hot Guam sun, and I was running 5 miles a day, kayaking, playing basketball. So of course I was skinny, but I was also in a calorie deficit. But I wouldn't necessarily say that I was eating healthy, though. I just didn't, I would eat low fat. During that time, low fat was very popular. You would go to the grocery store and you would see low fat cake, low fat hot dogs, low fat cookies, and all that. So I would buy anything low fat. And yes, I did lose weight, but I wouldn't say that it was necessarily a healthy diet. And we're going to talk more into what a healthy diet is, like my dad said. But just real quick, in terms of the strength training, like I said, I would gain weight, lose weight. So I gained weight after high school and during college, and then in law school, I lost weight again. And I started following the Body for Life method. And he was heavy with the strength training. But what he would suggest, and this is maybe good for our viewers and listeners, you would alternate days. So one day you would do cardio, next day you do strength training. So
Right.
I tend to follow that method even now in terms of the working out. He does incorporate a cheat day, and I incorporate that still today too. But in terms of his recipes that were in that book, Body for Life, they're so. But we're going to now get into what we believe is a better diet in terms of a
Yeah,
diet
but
you
you
should
you
majority follow.
but
But
you
go
lost
ahead.
a tremendous amount of weight and kept it off.
Uh,
Okay.
I kept it off. Well, as I said, I had different phases of losing weight. So after law school, yes, I kept it off for 4 years. But then, as you know, and I can show you a picture, this is how much I ballooned after law school. Like I was pretty, I started engaging in a not so healthy lifestyle, and we'll talk about why. A lot of it was because I was overworked and just was eating out, things like that. And we're going to talk about how you can combat that. And that's why I said, in many ways, it's hard to maintain weight loss. That was my problem before, but that I think is also because I really didn't have the right idea of the best diet. Um, Prior to discovering Gregor and Fuhrman and just eating for health, I was more eating for weight loss. I mean, I've done the cabbage diet. I did all kinds of diets. And yeah, you were in a calorie deficit, but you were starving yourself and you weren't necessarily getting those rich nutrients. So for our viewers and listeners, don't fall for those type of crash diets. You won't have longevity with that. Think about your health. So let's get into the Gregor, because yes, now I have maintained my weight loss because I lost weight again after what my medical incident, just real quick. And I have kept it off for the past, I guess now you could say about what, almost 6 years. So here we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
what we're about to talk about now.
Right. Well, here's one of the reasons why Americans are not losing weight is they have the wrong strategy. They're focused on cutting calories. And anytime you're trying to do a calorie deficit approach, you're going to be hungry, uh, you're not going to feel good, etc. But what they should be focused on is something called calorie density in terms of food. You want foods that have low calorie density. And those foods are your plant-based foods, which means that you can eat as much of that as you want and still not gain weight.
And I do eat as much of that as I
And so,
want.
if you all go back to our kale salad podcast, look at how much food we had in that salad. Well, guess what? That was a low calorie density salad. We had kale and arugula and edamame beans, cabbage, uh, onions, a whole, and obviously a lot of tomatoes, etc. That's the key. Now, let's talk about what really happens. Now, we know Americans aren't going to stop eating their meats. Dr. Greger, we love him. We love Dr. Fuhrman, but we know realistically most Americans are just not going to stop eating meat. So how do you lose weight when you're going to eat meat? The strategy is simple. You preload your meal with fruits and vegetables or salad or soup, and make sure that that particular soup or salad or whatever is preloaded with high fiber foods. And what did we say during our bean podcast? The highest fiber foods are beans. And who
Yes.
lives long, has a long life expectancy? Hispanics, because they eat 3 to 4 times as many beans as the average American. The only people that have a life expectancy higher than theirs is Asians, and they eat beans. So what
Yes.
happens when you eat beans? When you eat beans, or when you eat a high fiber diet, and that can be the G Bombs diet, be honest with you, it could be greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. When you eat a high fiber diet, what happens is that when you come behind that, again, preload, when you come behind that, whether it's a Twinkie or a steak or a pork chop, whatever,
Oh my
we
goodness.
we don't recommend you eat a lot of that. Whatever you eat off a piece of fried chicken. What happens is that fiber binds with those fats, those dietary fats, and basically you end up, even though let's say that that piece of chicken is 300 calories, that the high fiber in those beans and high fiber foods are going to bind with that chicken, and your body will not absorb all 300 of those calories. And remember, we always say it's not what you eat or drink, it's what you absorb. So you absorb less calories out of that piece of chicken, out of that Twinkie, etc., simply because you're eating something really high fiber. So lead with the high fiber plant-based foods in a salad or whatever. And then during the meal, even though I'm just going to confess, on my free day, which is Friday, I eat fish. Sometimes I eat a piece of fried fish, but I don't eat fried fish by itself. I eat it with some kind of high fiber foods. I may throw some beans in there. I clearly will have a salad in there. In fact, I kind of like our kale salad. I usually will eat my kale salad with that meal. So that way I am not absorbing all of that saturated fat.
In fact, today is my free day, and I am going to have a salad along with my choice of meat protein, which is not actually going to be fried, by the way. But this, in essence, is what we've also said on a previous podcast, how we mentioned and this was kind of before we knew the science fully of losing weight and like the science of how the body and the metabolism works. But we said if you're going to, I think it was on our meat podcast actually, if you're going to eat meat, always lead with a salad. So this again applies. It's all
Right.
about that fiber, the preloading.
Absolutely. Now,
Yes.
one other thing, there's some spices. Well, no, let's go back to this. There's a something called adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. I know it's a lot. That's an enzyme. It's called AMPK, and it's found in apple cider vinegar. And what they found is 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar per day will help you lose weight. Now, what you do with it, again, if you got that salad, you can put some on top of your salad. If you're bold enough, you can take a teaspoon of it. I mean, it's kind of stringent, but you put that on there. It's considered to be a master regulator of energy and metabolism. Okay,
But let me
so
add
it's
something
a
to this.
weight loss boost.
But let me add something to this because I know Gregor has mentioned the apple cider vinegar. But if you are going to take it straight, you must dilute it with water. Otherwise, you
Yes,
could affect your esophagus.
absolutely. Okay, so now let's get into spices and seeds. Again, G bombs. So what they found is a half a teaspoon of garlic powder. People lost 6 pounds of body fat over 6 weeks. like a half a teaspoon of garlic powder per day. They lost 6 pounds. I mean, yeah, 6 pounds over 6 weeks. Now, one of my favorite seeds is black seeds. But I take the black seed oil. But I also have black seeds, black cumin seeds. They also enhance weight loss. What you do is you put them in a pepper grinder or any kind of grinder like a coffee grinder, and you use it like pepper. You spray it over your food. And it also lowers cholesterol and triglycerides. And so a half a teaspoon equals 4 pounds of weight loss and an inch off of your waist. Oh no, I take that back. I'm getting ahead of myself. Cumin, not the black cumin, but the cumin, a half a teaspoon equals 4 pounds of weight loss and an inch off of your waist. It's the cumin. So it's two things. You can do the black cumin seeds and you can do the cumin. Okay.
Cumin, that is a popular spice on Mexican food. That type of
Yes.
cumin. Oh, okay,
Yes.
that's good. Okay.
Yeah. Now, Stacey, you'll love this. Cayenne pepper,
Mm-hmm.
that hot stuff, counteracts the metabolic slowing that accompanies weight loss and accelerates fat burning. Fat burning. So cayenne pepper, you put that in your diet, and a quarter teaspoon of ginger also contributes to weight loss. So those are your spices and seeds. And however you like to use those, incorporate them into your diet. And that also becomes what we call a weight loss boost. These are weight loss boosters.
And I have to say that is popular in certain people. People do make these type of shots. They put cayenne pepper and apple cider vinegar, and they create their concoctions and things like that. But then they may turn around and eat a burger.
As
So,
long as they eat it with some fiber, they're good.
okay.
They got to eat it with some fiber, though. They
But
got to eat
yeah.
it with some fiber. Now I'm gonna get a little technical. Uh, Thylakoids, spelled Thylakoids. Now, those are the membranes in the leaves of green leafy vegetables and are responsible for photosynthesis. We're just going to call it TK. Well, anyway, that membrane binds with dietary fat, making it less available for absorption. Again, go back to absorption. You want to minimize the calories in saturated fat from being absorbed into your body. And the best sources are obviously it's the G and the G bombs, the green leafy vegetables. And the darker the green, the more the TK. And one of my favorite kales is dinosaur kale.
I was going to say
It's
that.
that
Yes.
real dark one. And what you do with that is you steam it just a little bit. You don't want to overcook your greens, by the way. You want to you steam it briefly, and then you eat it. Now you're getting your TK. So you got fiber, you got TK in the greens. All of this stuff binds to dietary fat, and it takes it right out your system.
So that's the key. So you simplified it. Say it one more time because some people may, because we use a lot of scientific terms. So break it down one more
Okay,
time.
so fiber, which is your high fiber foods like your beans and grains, etc., whole grains, the TK, which is the green in the membranes of your green leafy vegetables, those things bind to the dietary fat and the saturated fat and literally carries that stuff out of your system. In other words, like just gave you the example. If you ate a 300 calorie piece of chicken, if you're eating fiber and TK with it, your body's not going to absorb the 300 calories. It's going to absorb maybe 150, maybe 200 to 150. In other words, you're still lowering your calcium, I mean, your calorie intake, absorption. Remember, it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. So we want to get you to minimize that.
Love that. So calling Popeyes now And I have my kale salad and my Popeyes. Yes. No, I'm
Yeah,
joking.
well, our
Your heart
strategy, to
still
be honest
matters
with
too.
you, one of the reasons we maintain our weight is because we, everybody may or may not be able to do this, but we eat meat once a week, and
Well,
I
sometimes
look,
twice for me. We have to be completely transparent. Sometimes it's twice a week for me, just
twice a
being
week, but
honest. Yeah.
I tell you what, I look forward to my free day. I can tell you that right now. I'm not gonna tell any, like I said, you have to be practical about this,
You have to be
and
practical, and we're human beings. It's just
right.
be, because I know vegans get this a lot. Like, why are you eating that mock meat? Because they probably enjoyed meat, but they just, at this point, either for ethical reasons or health reasons, don't want to consume animal products. But it doesn't mean you don't like the taste. So for us, we're not saying we don't like the taste of certain
And we
meat.
eat plant-based meats. We
Uh,
eat
uh, We
plant-based meats.
we do, but we're
Beyond
saying,
and
yeah.
Possible, we eat that.
But yeah, yes, we do eat that, mostly Beyond, because we'll do another show on coconut oil. But and some of these mock meats have coconut oils. But even with that, though, we do those in moderation. When I first started becoming plant-based, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but when I first started doing mostly plant-based eating, I did eat a lot of mock meat because I was trying to pretty much train my taste buds, because I was used to eating meat every day. And this may be a tip for some of our viewers and listeners as well. When you're trying to transition into a mostly plant-based diet, yes, you may very well eat mock meats a lot in the beginning. But I have to say, now that I've discovered, and we're going to talk about some tips in terms of recipes, now that I've discovered some great whole food plant-based recipes, I don't eat as much of the mock meat. I enjoy my chickpeas and lentils and my kale salad. I don't need meat with that or even a mock meat with it. But my other point was we have free days because, yes, we enjoy, my dad loves fish. I love the taste of certain meat. And I'm saying this because I think sometimes people, when they want to lose weight, they think that it's unrealistic for them, or they're looking at people who have lost weight thinking, I don't know, like they're doing the Lord's work or something, like they're doing something that's just superhuman. But no, we're everyday people making everyday choices. We're just, it's an everyday choice you have to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Stacy said, that like I said, we just lead with our plant-based um, foods, and of course we do eat plant-based 6 days, 5 to 6 days out of the week. And so we understand that maybe everybody can't quite do that yet, but the health outcomes are significant. I mean, Stacy lost what, 75 pounds, almost
Or
100
more.
pounds or
Yes.
more, and she's kept it off. So I think you have to focus on that. But more importantly, it's not just that; it's also the underlying conditions. That's really what's important here. You can be a tremendous runner, you can be lifting weights, etc. But if you have high cholesterol and high triglycerides because of your diet, it's going to affect your health. Okay. If you have diabetes, it's going to affect your health. So it's extremely important that you incorporate these plants into your diet to minimize that.
Right. Because my dad broke it down, and you want whole food, plant based mostly. And, but you take the steps you can. So are we ready to give them some tips, or do you have any other uh
Yeah, well, let's go with
things you want to talk about?
we already did the video on the kale salad. Um,
Yes.
Now what I do is because we're all busy, so I make smoothies,
We meal
and
prep.
so
This is
I
meal
don't
prepping.
I don't have to fix food. My breakfast, for example, I don't have to fix my breakfast. I have a big blender, about 64-ounce blender. I blend it up. I blend up my smoothie. Like my smoothie blender, my blender is sitting in the refrigerator right now. I'm getting ready to pour my smoothies for the week. I pour them, put them in the freezer, and I call it thaw, grab, and go. Now my smoothies have a lot of G bombs, not quite the onions, but it has a lot of the GBMBS in them. And so I blend that up with either and I usually either use a soy milk or pea protein milk base along with some hibiscus tea, which is the highest antioxidant beverage. And so I use that and I blend it and then I put it in the freezer and the next day it's thaw, grab and go. And Stacey, I'll let you talk about how you do your salads.
Yeah, so, but just to make sure people understand what we're saying, this is all about meal prepping. Meal prepping is important because for me, a lot of the reason why I started to gain the weight I lost after law school, why I started gaining that weight during my professional years, is because I would work late and long hours. And when I would come home, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. Like my dad said, we all live busy lives. So, with that, what happens when you're living a busy life and you're tired? You probably are inclined to stop at some type of fast food place, or you may even go to a grocery store, but you may want to get some type of processed food that's quick and easy to heat up. But when you meal prep, you're following these tips that we're giving you. Maybe you're making your kale salad, you're making your smoothies, and you know exactly what you're putting in those, you know exactly the ingredients that you're putting into those foods. You know that you're achieving your G bombs goals, and you don't have to think about it. You spend, yes, you may have to spend one day, maybe I would say like today I meal prepped. I would say it took me about 2 hours. I made my kale salad that my dad is talking about. What I do is I put them in mason jars. The kale salad that you can see on our page, that exact same recipe. What I do is I put I guess you can say um, like the onions and the tomatoes, those type of vegetables I put at the bottom, and even bell peppers, things like that. Kind of I guess you can say more liquidy type vegetables. You put those at the bottom. You may even put your dressing at the bottom. For me, I work from home, so I don't put the dressing in the mason jar. But if you're taking this to your job, you may put your dressing at the bottom, put your seasonings, all that you want on your salad, and then you at the top put your kale, your lettuce, your kale or your romaine or your arugula, all three or whatever it is you're choosing that day. And then you store it in the refrigerator. I've made about three for the week because on other days I may do cooked cruciferous vegetables, but I made three of those. So all I do is my dad has his sayings. He said, what is it? Thaw, grab and go. For this, it's just I don't have a saying, but I just take it out and I dump it into a bowl and it's ready. And I put my dressing in it. I don't have to think about it. And I also made a chickpea recipe. And I have, some rice with that, and it's currently in my freezer right now. So guess what? That's going to be my dinner. So I'm already pretty much set for the week. I don't have to think about it. So meal prepping is very important, and I strongly encourage you to do it.
That's true. I do the same thing for my workout, my pre-workout meal. Like right now, waiting on me right now is I use black rice. We'll talk about that later, as well as some black soybeans and arugula, and that's my pre-workout meal. Well, guess what? I basically prepped that a couple of days ago, put them in these small snack size Ziploc bags and in a bigger bag and freeze them. I have enough of those for a week. So again, I just thaw and eat it. Okay. And so that's what it, but the bottom line, sort of a philosophical point to all of this is if you eat for health, then your weight is going to take care of itself.
Yes.
That's the philosophical point. Eat healthy and your weight will take care of itself. And you know what it is. I mean, we've been talking about it for weeks. If you're on a G bombs diet, if you combine the G bombs with your meat, then you're going to be healthier. But the key is you don't want diabetes, you don't want cancer, you don't want cardiovascular disease, you don't want any of those things. So if you're eating for health to basically counter those things, and I'm gonna tell you right now, and we can't beat this drum enough. Fiber, fiber, fiber. Okay. All right. And obviously a lot of antioxidants are associated with with the G bombs fiber diet.
And also, we're talking about the meal prepping and eating healthier. Last week, we talked about menopause and how stress can be a part of that. I find when I'm meal prepping, I'm de-stressing. Again, I no longer have to think too much about that, about what I'm eating for the rest of the week. Now, I may make a few meals here and there during the week, but the majority of my meals are done. So that de-stresses me. It gives me back some of my time. So now I can spend that time maybe doing something that I enjoy. Also, it helps it may save in terms of electricity in your home because I will likely not have to turn on my oven or my stove for the next 2 to 3 days, unless I just want to again make just another random meal. So it just saves so much in terms of your life. It saves your time. It may save you a little bit in terms of the energy in your home and your electricity. It also may save you some money because you won't be eating out. So this is the way to go. And then obviously, ultimately, you're losing weight or maintaining your weight loss. So hey, it's a win, 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 win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, if you're eating to be healthy, in other words, we already know that, if you're diabetic, you need to eat low glycemic foods, but you need to eat a lot of fiber. Fiber can handle that. Same thing with cardiovascular disease. You don't want a whole lot of saturated fat in your diet. You want unsaturated fat, and you want flax seeds and all of the G bombs foods, and cancer. Berries play a big role in that, as well as flax seeds, and as well as obviously greens, beans, and mushrooms play a big role in that. So if you're eating those foods because you were trying to basically make sure that you don't get these particular diseases, then you're going to be okay. Your weight is going to take care of itself. And as we said, obesity affects all of those things: cancer, diabetes, obviously cardiovascular disease. But what we talked about last week is menopause. Okay, obesity affects you if you're in menopause. Okay, because of the production, the estrogen production. So we've got to get it together. Got to get it together. We got to break this trend in this country. We can't have 60 more years of weight gain. Can't
I
have it.
agree because that also increases our healthcare costs,
Yes,
all kinds of things. But as always, still consult your doctor, especially again when you're starting a new diet. And you should be talking to your doctor about a weight loss plan. I mean, a good doctor would talk to you about that if weight is an issue for you. But again, let's keep it real. There are skinny people who don't eat healthy either. So that's why, like you said, eat for health ultimately. Because yes, your weight will take care of itself, but it's really also about your internal health. You know, all of that matters. But this has been a great show. We will be, my father and I don't obviously live in the same home. I'm a grown woman with my own spot in a different state. But when we see each other here soon, we plan to give you some recipe videos. We may even do some grocery hauls because I know that some people are visual learners. So we will show you a lot of these tips that we share today. Like I'll show you how I meal prep my salads. My dad may can show you how he meal preps his smoothies. So you can just see what that looks like. But hopefully we've explained it to you well and you can start now. And you do what works for you. Take the steps and you don't have to be perfect.
amen. I agree. So go G-bombs.
Yes. Shout out to Dr. Fuhrman. That's his acronym that a lot of people have implemented into their lives, and it absolutely works. And I can say personally, it has worked for me. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you again for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to share our videos with some of your family and your friends, and just become our evangelist. Spread the word. Peace.